Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Thanks so much for clicking on today's video. Today is July 31st and you know what that means. It is time to do our monthly wrap up. Let's start off with some stats of the month. For our total books read, I think this is my best reading month ever. I read 13 books in total. Now I will headline that 3 of those were novellas, so it made it a little bit easier to increase that number. But hey, 13 books in total, not going to complain. For the genre breakdown, I had 7 fantasy. Not gonna lie guys, I'm a little fantasied out. 4 romance, 1 nonfiction, and 1 sci-fi. For the number of books that I read from my TBR, I completed 7 out of the 8 books. I really thought I was gonna do it this month. I thought I was gonna hit all 8, but there was one book at the end of the month which just totally ruined all of my momentum. I'll let you guys know what book that is whenever we get to it. It took me over a week to read, which was much longer than I expected, and it just ate up all of my time to get to this book. So the one book that I didn't read from my TBR this month was Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. I do very much want to read this book. This is another fantasy book. This is YA fantasy, and I think it's like a King Arthur retelling. I don't even know the original King Arthur story, so this book will take me by complete surprise regardless. I was procrastinating this book because it is like 500 pages long. Which, come on Tracy, why you gotta do that to me? I will get to this fall time because I plan on reading a ton of fantasy books this fall. This just wasn't in the cards for this month, and that's okay. My average rating was 3.73 stars. This month was kind of odd for my ratings. No books were overly terrible, but I didn't have a single 5-star this month. There was a lot of 3.5s and 4s, and I think that's reflected pretty well in my average rating. For my total pages read, physically, I read 3,006 pages. However, I did read 2.5 audiobooks because I listened to 2 full books and a novella, which counted for 814 pages. So if you do include those numbers, in total, I read 3,820 pages total. So let's hop in and talk about the books. First book we read this month was on my Kindle. It was The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. This was my second Christina Lauren book. The first book I read from them was Love and Other Words. Not gonna lie, really was disappointed and did not like the writing style in that book. The Paradise Problem, I ended up giving 3.5 stars. Wasn't a favorite, but wasn't as bad. In this book, we follow Liam and Anna. In college, to allow them to get subsidized housing, they got fake married. Legally, they were married, but they had no relationship to each other. So Liam comes back into her life a couple years later and needs her help. For Liam to get his inheritance, he has to appear to be happily married for 5 years. If him and Anna can keep up with the charade for a few more months, he'll be able to get his inheritance. However, in the meantime, before the deadline, they have to appear happily married in front of all of his family on a private island to celebrate his sister's wedding. Liam has a very estranged relationship with his family, so he is very stressed. Anna does not fit the mold for what the family wants, and of course, they barely know each other. They haven't spoken in years, so they also need to convince everyone that they are happily married and to not raise any suspicions. I said that this book was Crazy Rich Asians meets Just Go With It. Crazy Rich Asians because the family is insanely rich and Anna just does not fit in with them, similar to the main character in Crazy Rich Asians, but Just Go With It just because of the absolute insanity that comes along with pretending that you're married to someone even though you're not. So I would compare it to Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston's relationship within that movie. If you like either of them, which those are 2 of my favorite movies, if you like either of those movies, would recommend this book. It is fun, it is hilarious. However, in my opinion, it's not perfect. There were quite a few just like eye roll situations. For instance, I really just didn't like the third act conflict, which I'm thinking is maybe a theme in Christina Lauren's writing style. The conflicts that they create just kind of rub me the wrong way. I don't think that they're too realistic. I don't ever think that the characters handle them too well. In this book specifically, Liam was kind of stuck in a catch-22 situation. There was no great answer, and I personally felt that Anna was pushing him into making kind of an impossible decision. So 3.5 stars. It is a great summer read since it takes place on a private island in the summertime. So if you were in desperate need of a summer read, maybe pick it up, but definitely far from my favorite romance I've read recently. Continuing on, the next book I read was Vacation Wars by Meghan Quinn. This is on Kindle Unlimited. Also, what's cool about this book specifically is there is an audiobook portion that comes with it. So not only can you read it for free on Kindle Unlimited, but you also can listen to it on Audible, and the two platforms will sync up so you can kind of just easily switch between the two, which was really nice and helped me read this book fairly quickly. I think this is my first Meghan Quinn book. This one took place in Greece, where we follow Tessa. She is in her family's favorite vacation spot in Greece. They go every year. She's there with her sister and two of their longtime friends on a little girls trip before her sister gets married. And the trip kind of takes a turn for the worse for Tessa because her and her friends signed a contract whenever they were teenagers that if any of them were single by the time they turned 30, the friends could basically hop in and take over her love life. So that is exactly what the gals do. The gals start creating all of these crazy scenarios to help find Tessa a man. And honestly, they just like totally gang up and bully her for majority of the trip, which is the main reason for me giving this a 3 stars. I thought the sister was so toxic. She was so mean, absolutely had zero boundaries, and Tessa was just getting walked all over on for the majority of the book. So that she isn't completely alone, she ends up teaming up with her lifelong crush from the island, Miles, to kind of help save her from a bunch of these situations where she's incredibly uncomfortable with these various men. And over time, after continually sneaking away together, fake dating a little bit, they start falling for each other. I thought Miles was honestly the best part of the story. He was so sweet, so caring. He did provide a good amount of comedic relief, and he had his own family dynamics that he was working with, as his father owned the resort and they had a pretty strained relationship since he moved back to Greece and started helping out with the resort again. But Tessa's friends, their dialogue was pretty cringy to me. Again, just not the best book I've ever read. Since this is free, if you have Kindle Unlimited and you want to read a romance that takes place in Greece, I would say go for it. But if you don't have Kindle Unlimited, I think this one's a pass. Continuing on to just like another mid book. It was honestly kind of a rough start to the month. The next book we have is The Bridge Kingdom. This is a fantasy book where we get dual POV. We follow our female main character, Laura. She is the princess of the kingdom of Maradrina. It's kind of the best I can do. And she's been hidden away and trained her whole life with her and her sisters in kind of like an assassin's boot camp. It was always known and expected that the princess of Maradrina, she would always be married off to the king of Ithaca. So their dad hid them away, trained them all to be assassins, and then chose the best candidate for the job to send to Ithaca and overthrow that kingdom. Laura's been told her whole life that the king of Ithaca is evil, they're demons, they're gonna hurt you, they're going to treat you terribly. And then she gets there and she realizes, that might not be true. The king actually seems really nice. And some of the things that my dad has been saying don't really add up. The king of Ithaca is Aren. This poor guy, he's honestly just trying his best. He's trying to make sure his bride feels safe, take care of her. To me, he honestly gave major Rhys energy, like Rhys and Feyre dynamics, because he's thought of and feared by the outside world, but inside he's really like a super nice guy and wants a more unified territory, but yet he's always demonized by people. Why I ultimately gave this 3.5 stars is this book was so politics heavy. 80% of this book was politics. And I went into this book thinking it was more of a romantasy, more heavy on romance, but there was almost next to no romance. Epitome a slow burn enemies to lovers just because of how slowly it was. I thought realistically I was going to give this a 3 stars, but the ending was pretty good. There was a pretty good plot twist that happened, and I bumped it up to a 3.5. And I do want to read the next book in the series, which is called The Traitor Queen, just because the ending of this book was so crazy. I do want to see what happens next. I really, really hope that there's more romance in the next book, because there was honestly like only 1 or 2 scenes in this book that was really giving romance, and that was kind of disappointing to me. Next book is our first physical, and I read this book in a reading vlog where I took you guys through what I realistically read in a week. I started that video off with Powerful, which is the little novella that comes after Powerless, where we get Adina's perspective, and the timelines between Powerless and Powerful are corresponding. We're just simply getting a different point of view. I felt like exactly the reason why I loved Powerless for the writing style was very well executed in this book. I felt like it was very consistent from the first book, and I absolutely love Lauren Roberts' writing. This book is absolute emotional turmoil because you know exactly what's going to happen at the end of it, because the ending we see in Powerless. I am curious to see how Adina's love interest in this book gets integrated into the last book, because he isn't mentioned anywhere in book 2, but I have to imagine he's going to get incorporated since we got a whole book with half of his perspective. I gave this 4 stars just because I don't love the romance we get in this book as much as Powerless. Powerless is 10 out of 10 on the romance scale for me. I absolutely love Pei and Kaiden. What name did I just say? Pei and Kai. I don't know how I got that other name. Ultimately, Adina and her love interest, I don't think compare. Lauren Roberts had to do just as much in half the pages, so we just didn't have enough buildup, in my opinion. And it's really hard for a novella to be 5 stars. But I did enjoy this. I would say if you are reading the Powerless series, don't skip this. It was very fun to get a different POV. And once finishing that, I couldn't just stop there with Lauren Roberts. I had to go into Reckless because it had just come out. Again, that is in the reading vlog that I mentioned before, so if you want to see super in-depth thoughts on Powerful, Reckless, and a novel love story that comes up next, they're all mentioned in that video. Reckless, I do think Reckless has a bit of middle book syndrome. If we think about the plot on a linear line, we have Powerless here and we are working towards the end. Reckless on the timeline literally takes us from here to here, okay? Not much. I think the whole book only takes place between like 2 to 3 weeks of a time period, and it picks up right where Powerless left off. Powerless left off on a crazy cliffhanger. Thought we would maybe get some more answers in this one, but really not much happens. Almost next to nothing happens plot-wise. There is quite a bit that happens with Pei and Kai. Their relationship definitely has some very interesting developments throughout this book. But was this book everything I was hoping for? No. Did I still absolutely love it? Yes, of course. I read Reckless on my Kindle and I had 41 highlights. For me, typically if I even really love a book, I'll do maybe 8 highlights. I mean, I was highlighting every other page because the writing style, the banter, their relationship, it eats. There's no other way to put it. But could this plot have been beefed up and strengthened? Yes, 100%. Reckless also ends on a huge cliffhanger. I think Lauren has to deliver a lot in Reckless because she has a lot of loose strings right now that she needs to weave together so that we don't just have forgotten, half thought through plot lines. Next physical we have is a novel love story by Ashley Poston. This was a cutie little romance story that has some magical realism elements in it. Ashley Poston is most famously known for writing The 7-Year Slip. For a novel love story, we follow our main character Elsie, who gets lost in a thunderstorm and ends up driving into the town of her favorite book series. So at first she drives in, she's not really thinking anything of it. She starts having car problems, decides, okay, time to park for the evening and just hunker down. She starts walking around, talking to people, and she realizes, hey, this town seems really familiar. And that's when she realizes that she knows everyone here. And the town is exactly where the author left it off. The book series is a 5-book book series, but the author died while writing the 5th book. So the characters are kind of half finished. And once Elsie shows up, some things start going wrong or some things start changing. The town starts evolving beyond what the books provided. And it's up to her and the grumpy bookstore owner to get them a happy ending. Kind of the unfinished plotline of the town follows Elsie's own life. She's feeling really lost, that she's losing touch with her friends, that she's falling behind. And as she repairs the town, she ends up piecing together her own life as well. It felt like a Hallmark movie in the best way possible. So low stakes, but it's just sweet. It's enjoyable to read, easy to read, super quick. I know a lot of people in the book community have been disappointed by this and not rating it as highly as the 7-Year Slip. I personally think that's probably just a little bit too high of expectations, but I thought this was still extremely well written. I gave it the same rating as the 7-Year Slip because they both made me feel almost the exact same way. I think this was one of my best books of the month and would highly recommend. The next physical book I have here is Leading Gracefully by Monique Tallon. This was my nonfiction read of the month. I mainly read this for work because this book specifically is geared towards women and women's self-improvement journey and how to relate that to the workplace. If I could rename this book, I would rename it How to Not Get in Your Own Way as a Woman in Leadership. She really encourages women to be women and embrace your femininity. Within modern workplace culture, there is a huge push for women to act like men, exude very masculine features, and are often seen as like bitches and bulldogs in the workplace, trying to emulate traits and characteristics that are commonly associated with men. And she's kind of like, hey, why are you doing that? We're women for a reason. We have our own positive character traits for a reason. And studies show that companies and employees respond better to female traits as opposed to male traits. So why are we trying to be something that we're not? I really liked this, even though this book has been absolutely roasted on Goodreads. She probably could have worded some things differently. She made a reference to the angry feminist movement. I didn't take that seriously. Again, she's talking about women who are trying to emulate men. Specifically within that movement, she's not saying that all feminists are angry and are wrong, but I saw that there were quite a few reviews who were very unhappy with that mention. So if that's something that you think you would get offended by, maybe don't read this book. But personally, I liked this book. I thought it was interesting. I thought she had a unique perspective. One thing I really liked is she has a bunch of exercises in this book, which some of them I felt were really impactful and useful. And she created a whole model called the Feminine Leadership Model, which combines 7 female strengths and 4 masculine traits to create a balanced leadership style. So she's really just encouraging people to take kind of the best of both situations. Let's grab hold of our emotional capacity as women that maybe men lack, but let's also grab onto driven, assertive, confident nature that men have, combine it into one, and be the best version of ourselves possible. Another cool thing about this book is it's really short, so I think if you were at all interested in this, you could read this very quickly. Give a couple of the exercises a try, see if you like it. I think it is a pretty low commitment since it is so quick and easy to read. I would personally recommend. Next book is an audiobook that I listened to through Spotify. It is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. We follow our main character, Dora, who is actually supposed to represent a neurodivergent female character. The storyline of Half a Soul is as a child, a fairy attempted to basically abduct her, but only managed to take half of her soul. So she doesn't respond to social norms, social cues like most people do. And she doesn't have the full emotion range that everyone else does. She lives with her cousin and her aunt. Her cousin is very accepting of her, loves her regardless. Her aunt, however, not very nice, not accepting at all. The book takes place in 1800s England. We follow Dora and Vanessa in their coming out to society season, where they're mainly focusing on finding Vanessa a husband. This book is literally Bridgerton meets fairies. Super fun. I really loved the audio narrator who told this story on Spotify, and I thought the messaging of this book was really impactful as well. Dora's kind of been under the assumption for her whole life that she is what's wrong, she is broken, she is not a whole person, therefore she'll never be able to find a husband that would accept her for how she is. But we actually find out that along the way there is someone who will accept her exactly as she is and doesn't want her to change and loves her for who she is. So I just felt like that was a really sweet story, really good messaging, especially for younger girls, and overall gave this book a 4.2 stars. Half a Soul is the start of the Regency Fairy series. So within the Spotify audiobook, the prequel called The Lord Sorcier is also included within the book. So the prequel follows Elias, or the Lord Sorcier, and how he meets and gets introduced to Albert within the English-French War. It's only 5 chapters long, so it's really short, but it is nice to get more backstory on Elias because he definitely has a lot of mystery surrounding him, and his past has a lot of mystery throughout Half a Soul, so it's just nice to get more information on him. Since this book was so short and a huge plotline of it was war, wasn't my favorite novella I've ever read. Gave it 3 stars, but continuing on from that, there's another novella between book 1 and 2 of the series called The Latch. This book is a dual timeline where we follow right after Half a Soul ends, and then also we get Elias's childhood. So again, just more information on Elias and what makes him who he is, and then how the events of his childhood translate to situations he's having to deal with in present day. I really did like The Latchkey. If this was longer, this could have been 4.5, 5 stars. Again, it was so short. I think it was 7 chapters. I gave it a 3.5, but this is a really strong novella. To access this book, I had to sign up for Olivia Atwater's newsletter, and once you sign up for her newsletter, you're able to download this PDF document to read The Latchkey. I would honestly recommend it. I think she wrote it really well, great messaging, and excited to go into book 2 and continue the story. Okay, not many books left. Our last physical is Fable by Adrienne Young. This book was actually a huge disappointment for me. I had high hopes for it because I know this comes very highly recommended by Carrie Can Read. However, this was my lowest rated book of the month, not because of the writing. I actually think the writing is very good. Just the topics discussed and talked about, I literally couldn't care less about. So we only get one POV in this book, and we follow Fable. Her dad is a merchant, and after losing her mom in a deadly storm, her dad basically abandons her on this island. He says, "You're not meant for this life," which is kind of like a pirate's life. "If you're ever able to make it onto the mainland, like, let me know, and that will prove to me that you are made for this, you can handle this world, but otherwise I'm basically just abandoning you." When she's like 13 or 14 years old, I don't even know, but she makes her living as a diver off the coast, where she dives for fish, shells, stones, crystals, things of that nature. But things start going awry after a little while on the island. She starts making a little bit too much money. People start taking notice. They want to know how she's doing it, and she has to flee. She manages to hop on a boat and join the crew, but she realizes maybe this crew isn't exactly what she seems. Maybe this boat isn't safer than the island she was already on. And you follow her journey, trying to get back to the mainland to confront her dad and see what happens next. The main thing I really didn't like about this is there's so much boat talk. A lot of this book takes place on a ship. I would say at least half of this book takes place on a ship. And there's just so many words that I don't understand or don't care to understand about boats. Also, one thing that really rubbed me the wrong way, this story is kind of leading up to this quest. We're working towards a quest. We start the quest and then jump to the next chapter. The quest is done. We don't get any details about the quest. We basically just learn if they were able to accomplish it or not without any details. So I did not like that at all. This book was maybe sitting at a 3 stars before that, but whenever I saw that, I was just like, nope. I'm sitting through all of this shit that I don't care about boats, and you're not even gonna tell me the quest that we've been working towards this whole book? not for me, babes. Not for me. This is only a duology. Will I be reading the other book in this duology? No, I cannot take any more boat talk. I literally never want to get on a boat after this. So that was our last physical of the month. We only have 2 more to discuss. First one was a Kindle Unlimited read. It is called That Kind of Guy by Stephanie Archer. I wanted to read this after my absolute love affair with The Fake Out that Stephanie Archer wrote. She has a whole completed series called the Queen Cove series, which follows a family of brothers. We get the first brother's POV. His name is Emmett, and our female main character is Avery. They enter into a fake dating marriage of convenience because Emmett is running for the town mayor, and he's always been known as a single bachelor, but in politics that's kind of frowned upon. People would prefer to see a family man. Avery is very well liked and respected within the town, so they team up together. She agrees to it because she is wanting to buy the restaurant that she works at, and she needs a co-signer on the loan so that she's able to get the money. So they enter into this mutually beneficial relationship. Emmett has always irritated Avery. She never really liked him. I wouldn't call them enemies by any means because Emmett always liked her. So it was more of like a dislike to love on Avery's part. This was just like a little silly, goofy romance. Was this actually a 3.75 stars? Probably not. It's probably not anything special, but I just read it at the perfect time. It was exactly what I was wanting to read. After Fable, I was just wanting something more my style, something that didn't involve boats. And I picked this up on a whim, was able to read it so quickly. Would recommend if you like Stephanie Archer's writing. I do think it's cute, and I am continuing the series this upcoming month, reading the next book and following the next brother. And that brings us to our final book of the month. I listened to The Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. So this was the book that completely stalemated my reading for the month. At first, I didn't know how highly rated this book was going to be. For the actual writing, this book was so well thought out, so well executed, so detailed. I can tell that Andy Weir put so much thought and effort into this book, and he did such an amazing job. Absolute 10 out of 10. For me, I just wasn't connecting with the actual content within the book because this is so science heavy. We follow an astronaut who wakes up in space after multiple years in a coma, and he's battling memory loss. So he can't even remember his own name, let alone why he is in space and what he's meant to do. We go through step by step by step of him relearning, remembering, and then attempting to solve the problem and save the world. And I bet anyone remotely interested in science or physics or biology would absolutely eat this book up because Andy Weir like proves everything he says with science. It's not like he's just throwing out random words and random ideas. Like this whole intergalactic science problem that he creates, I'm pretty sure checks out scientifically. But it was just like a little bit too many facts, a little too much science. Let's say there was a 15-minute chapter. I'm only grasping about 3 minutes of it. All of the nuanced details, I mean, it's going right over my head, babe. I don't know what the hell you're saying. So that was really hard. In the first half of the book, he's alone, but then you get introduced to another character, Rocky. And once we were able to build the emotional connection and the emotional bond between those two, I started caring a lot more. And the ending of this book, oh my gosh, the ending of this book, so emotional. I gave this rating a half-star bump up just based off of like the last 2 chapters because I was really sitting at like, okay, this is going to be a 4-star book. 5 stars for the actual writing and execution, 3 stars for how much I care. 4, let's meet in the middle. But the ending of this book had such an emotional impact, I had to land on a 4.5. And this was the best book that I listened to or read this entire month. I would recommend Project Hail Mary, but just know getting into this, please be under the full expectation that this is basically a science textbook. And so that is my July reading wrapped up. I already know what my August TBR looks like, and all I gotta say is August could not be more different from July. So if you don't feel like these books tickle your fancy, just know that August is completely different. I'm excited for you guys to see that video and to see what we have in store. Let me know, what was your favorite book that you've read this month? Always looking for more book recommendations and ideas. Hope to see you guys in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate your support. Make sure to like and subscribe before you leave, and I'll see you in the next one.